our esteemed attendees. I want to welcome you all to today's session on leadership. And my name is Zahra Lethome from Ashoka, East Africa. I will be moderating this session together with my colleague Chiamo from Ashoka, South Africa. So I take this opportunity to very much welcome you all. So why exactly we decided to focus on leadership is number one, Africa together with the rest of the world is going through a very rapid transformation. But unfortunately, we are seeing social innovators still going or faced with a number of challenges. So one of them being that of leadership, which is very key in terms of helping realize development and scoping of the solutions. So the reason why we have our panelists here today, experts from various regions and organizations, is so that they can help us define these challenges and see how exactly we can come up with solutions to these problems. Before I invite our panelists to introduce themselves, I want to take this opportunity to invite our audience members. Please feel very free to use the chat section below to ask any questions, to comment on anything, and also to introduce yourselves. Let us know where you're joining us from as we continue with this. Opportunity to invite Mr. Jean-Francois from the Global Board of the International Coaching Federation. Mr. Jean, the floor is yours. Karibu.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to this fourth annual African conference on social entrepreneurship. It's an honor to be with you all, and I look forward to interactions with my esteemed co-panelists and the many participants coming up online. I've been given 10 minutes to share a bit about how coaching can help social entrepreneurs. And I'll share with you a few pictures, in fact, about it. But first of all, what I want to do is tell you a story. And the story happened in this garden. And it's really a story that defined coaching. So here we are in that garden, somewhere in the US, actually. It's lunchtime and the family is having their lunch. It's Sunday, actually, and they have lunch with an uncle who is visiting. And then after 30 minutes, a little boy of the house is really bored with those adult discussions and decides discreetly to go in the garden and climb one of these big trees you see behind, right? Which he never did before. And there he goes up to the middle of the tree, and suddenly his mother sees him. And what does she do? She shouts, "Wow, this is dangerous, you're gonna fall, please calm down." What happens next? Well, the little kid, of course, is terrified and starts to shake and is paralyzed. So the uncle who is visiting is a good tree climber, just goes to the garden, climbs up the tree and gets the little kid back down. And that's a Sunday. Then the story goes on Monday, because the mother's gone to the market in the morning. There's only the uncle and the little boy at home. And the little boy, the uncle asks the little boy, "Hey, how about you want to climb the tree again?" Then can you guess what the boy says? "No, uncle, this is dangerous. I'm gonna fall." And then the uncle talks him into giving it a try with him around as safety, right? So eventually the boy agrees to go to the tree. Can you guess how high he climbs? Well, he climbs halfway up the tree and then again becomes paralyzed with fear with the memories from the previous day. That's when the uncle who is behind the boy on the tree trunk tells him, "Hey, look around. What do you see?" And the boy does so and see branches and then says, "Hey, uncle, I see branches." Yeah. Uncle says, "So what do you want to do?" And the little boy thinks and says, I can cut that branch, put my foot, left foot on this one, my right foot on that one, cut the other one. And then step by step, the little boy climbs up to the top of the tree. And at the top of the tree, he says to his uncle, "Wow, uncle, thank you so much for making me climb the tree. It's so cool here. I can see our neighbor's house and all, superb." And then the uncle says, "Wow, hey, I did not make you climb the tree. I didn't even help you. I didn't tell you what to do. Yeah, you just climbed it by yourself." And so then at the end of the story, my question to you is, next day, Tuesday, if the little boy is alone because the uncle has gone back to business in somewhere else, is the little boy able to climb the tree again? What do you think? Yeah. So the consensus will be generally, yes, he can. Now imagine if instead the uncle had told him, "Hey, look, you want to grab that branch and then put your foot on this one, this other branch, right? And the other foot on that other branch, and guided the little boy up to the top." Then would the little boy be able to climb the tree the next day or not? Probably not, right? So the story, of course, is about the essence of coaching, right? The essence of coaching is to have people investigate by themselves how they can progress, and it increases confidence and accelerates growth. Whereas telling leads to dependence, coaching leads to confidence and growth. And the International Coaching Federation, which is the largest coaching association of professional coaches around the world, has defined coaching as partnering with clients, those coached, right, in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. Now, for those of you who like stories about coaching, like real stories, right, I really invite you to go to this website, and I'm going to write in the chat box how you can go there before I share my slide again, because then on that page, you will see lots of short videos about coaching, what it does for people around the world, how it empowers entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs. Yeah. Now, having said that, we come to the topic, part of the topic of today, which is resilience in leadership. And in this moment in time, oh, yes, sorry, I wanted to be clear about the direct benefits of coaching just before zooming in on leadership and resilience, right? Coaching is designed to enhance situational and self-awareness and empathy, and develop curiosity, critical and creative thinking, and increase confidence, autonomy, and resilience. And that's where I want to say, in our world today, major triggers of negative emotions are at play because of the uncertainty, the fast change, the complexity always increasing, right? Those 5 major triggers of emotion and fear and anxiety, right, are the risk to lose status, the risk to lose certainty about the future, the risk to lose autonomy, the risk to lose relatedness, like a sense of belonging, and the risk to lose a sense of fairness. That's what neuroscience has demonstrated, in fact. And I'm here to say that, of course, when we coach people, right, help them think at their best, bring out their best ideas, have them challenge, make them more robust, and find their way forward, then they gain a sense of self-worth, and therefore their status is boosted. By design, of course, they gain certainty about where they want to go and what they want to do. They are all autonomous in their quest for the way forward, because the coach is not an advisor. The coach is humbly a thinking partner, right? And then, of course, in coaching, there is this strong relationship between the coach and the client. And there is absolute fairness, because the coach will never be judgmental as a thinking partner. The coach is neutral. Yeah. So That's why coaching can really help us all at a time when we're so worried in front of this picture about the future, right? And there's more. Coaching also helps develop in leadership the capability to role model collaborative behaviors, right? And to be very simple and fast on this one, a collaborative leader will be at the very minimum someone who brings out her best or his best, right? At the next step, better, someone who also can bring out others' best. And then at gold medal level, someone who brings out his or her best, right? Others' best and the team's best. And that's what we do as coaches. And I can see all our clients adopt similar capabilities and behaviors with their team members, right? And in addition, in coaching, we are typically agile. And there again, the clients who are coached become agile as well. We are agile because we are eager learner. We keen to experiment. We comfortable not knowing. We learn from mistakes. We are versatile in our thinking, which means we think from different perspectives, different levels, right? And we are courageous decision makers. Now, there's a lot more in my slide deck that I'm going to pass because I don't have much time anymore, right? I just want to say to you, I'll put the slide deck in the chat box so you can download it, and you'll see how Apple and Google use coaching a lot, and you'll see also the impact that coaching has in companies, which is really, really impressive on how well the team functions, how the engagement increases, the productivity, the quality of relationship with employees, and the speed of leadership development. And then, of course, it's particularly appreciated by millennials because a Price Waterhouse-Cooper study has clearly shown millennials want self-actualization above all else, and coaching is their preferred modality, actually. Having said that, just a couple of words on the International Coaching Federation. It's the larger professional body of coaches around the world, with at the moment more than 41,000 members in almost all countries, with chapters all around the world, and a good 15 of them in Africa. Last time we counted. Your contact for any information on the organization is Miss Kathleen Lihanda. She's based in Nairobi, and you can reach her at this email, which I will also copy in the chat box, and you can learn more about the association, the International Coaching Federation, at the website www.coachfederation.org. With this, a little parting gift for this introduction. On this page, all social entrepreneurs are welcome to go on YouTube, right? And click on any video about leadership, particularly leadership in crisis time, that may sound like useful to you. I'll copy the link in the chat box in just 1 minute. You can also reach out to me directly by email or by scanning my LinkedIn profile here. And once again, I hope I kept my 10 minutes, Zara and Chamo, and thanks very much for the invitation. Looking forward to the rest of our conversation today.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be part of this particular panel. And probably I'll just start with a question to everybody here. You're either in a leadership position, you aspire to be a leader, or maybe you just want to be a follower. But just think back, what is it that you would have wanted to be done when you are a student to be able to help you to be what you are right now? Maybe you can put in the chat box, what is it that you'd have wanted done when you were a student so that you can become the person you are today? Maybe we can put in the chat box, maybe for a second. Okay, I don't see anyone putting anything. I see mentorship. Now, sometimes we think about where we are right now, and we can reflect on what it is that we have become. And we look back and wonder, if I go back to being 16 years old today, or being 21 years today, what is it that I would have wanted to know, considering what I have gone through? And what is it that I can tell now somebody else, so that they don't go through the same journey I've gone through, so that we can shorten their journey to becoming the leaders that they want to be today. So we are all created to actually be leaders and be mentors, because if we are reflective of our journey, then we can be able to know how can we tell somebody else who is at 16 today, or 20 years old, they're students and they're graduating probably from university, so that we can shorten the journey to their becoming the change makers that they should be. That's what all actually mentorship is about, and that's what leadership is about. Today, I'm representing here two organizations. One is the Association for Faculty Enrichment in Learning and Teaching, and our main focus is to develop the pedagogies that help students to become whatever it is that you have as a dream. Then as teachers, as lecturers, we want to make sure that you become that particular person. We don't have all the answers, we don't have all the solutions, but we've walked the journey. What kind of activities, what kind of space can we be able to create to enable you to become the person you want to become? That's what we explore as AFELT. It's shortened as AFELT. So we work with university lecturers, we work with those people that train others, and we develop a mentorship program among the people who teach, so that they can mentor each other on the best pedagogies for that. The second organization I represent, because AFELT is a membership organization, we all come from different institutions, and we come together to share our experiences and to train each other on what has worked and to reflect on what hasn't worked, so that we can improve learning in higher education. The second organization, I actually work with youth groups, and this is basically a mentorship program. And this is where we normally ask ourselves, I am where I am. What would I have wanted to know, so that my journey would have been shorter and I can have more impact? And then if I have learned something and I've become a reflective practitioner, then can I be able to mentor someone else, a younger person? Can we have that particular conversation, so that I can enable them, or not really enable them, but share things that can help them to shorten their journey? So can we develop the change makers that we want to see? So we normally work to design your own future. That's what we call the program, designing your own future. What future do you envision, and how can you get to this particular future? And these are the people we look at as transformational. This is transformational leadership. Yeah. So people who actually identify with their communities, and they're able to see issues and they are able to change them. There's a big question whether graduates from universities or even from high school can integrate in the job market. And can we be able to actually see problems in our communities as opportunities? But how do we develop this capacity to think? I was looking at a clip someone shared about Einstein responding to the question, what is the formula for the speed of light? And he says, I don't have to keep all that information. And that's not the reason we go to school. But the reason we go to school is actually to help people to think. If people can think, can be helped to think, then they can be anything they want to be. They can use the information they have to change their communities. So today, basically, I think we'll be looking at what does transformational leadership mean? What are basically the trends that you need to be looking at? And how can you be able to use what we have learned, mentorship, to develop this particular capacity to bring about the social change you want to see? Because right now we know that leadership, work or even businesses are about people and thinking about people and developing solutions that are related to people. So according to what JF has shared, coaching becomes a very critical part of this particular path. So mentoring and coaching, working with people and helping them to make sure that we are collaborating and working in the same space. So I'm glad to join this conversation and to see how to respond to questions around transformational leadership.
Thank you for that. Now I'd like to call upon Dr. Adun to do her introduction, please.
Thank you and good morning. It's morning here still in Lagos, Nigeria, where I am. And just like Mary, I'm here wearing two hats. So I'm the executive director of the Sahara Center, which is an NGO that is set up to advance cultural and cultural dimensions of of sustainable development. So basically looking at how we build a better society using culture, arts, and tourism. And then I also am part of the faculty at Lagos Business School, where I teach on sustainability in the strategy department to business leaders, mostly owners, so entrepreneurs, managers, and senior managers. And so it's interesting that we're having this conversation. My background is economics, but I also did my research on leadership. So my PhD was on leadership, but in the tourism industry. And what we did find, building on from what Mary has said about transformational leadership and what Jean has also spoken about in terms of coaching and helping a leader to achieve his or her objectives, is it particularly in context like Nigeria or in Africa where, you know, life is a bit more dynamic, there's a strong institutional void. It's also important that the leader is practically intelligent. And basically what that means is that being able to choose which of the leadership skills you need at the right time to apply to solve the issue that you want to solve. So practical intelligence just combines, you know, emotional intelligence, academic intelligence, social intelligence, creative intelligence, basically different abilities, and the ability to say, okay, for this problem now, how am I able to actually solve these problems? Sometimes you can learn from your own experience. So again, connecting to what Mary said about reflexivity, it's important that as a leader, one is reflexive, but I think it's also important that we add a little bit to that and say that the leader needs to also be philosophic in the sense of being able to also contemplate and ask questions, particularly looking at this forum, you know, Ashoka, I'm here invited by Ashoka and looking at how we're trying to advance social entrepreneurship. It's important that we're asking ourselves, what exactly do we want to achieve? Why do we want to do this? What problems do we want to solve? And how best can we solve them? Knowing that the challenges that surround us are so they're every day, sometimes insurmountable, but very dynamic. But also, how do we start to then channel other people to be able to lead? It's not only about, you know, getting to political power or business leadership. At every level you are within an organization, you are able to influence other people. Like, so Jean shared the slide on, you know, the team. You know, how can a team be effective? It's self-leadership that, you know, that helps us to drive that. Anyway, so these are some of the concepts that I will be reflecting on as we talk in this conversation: practical intelligence, philosophic practitioner as a leader, and the ability to also understand that self-leadership is perhaps the most powerful element, because you must lead yourself first before you can expect to lead others. So thank you for this.
Thank you very much. So according to like the agenda that we have, we'll be now entering the guided questions. So I'll just facilitate a few questions. Me and Zara will be facilitating a few questions, asking you guys about like the types of leadership that you've been. So I'll start with Mr. JF. So as an author, a speaker, a master certified coach, may you please define resilient leadership for us that might not have a clear idea of what resilient leadership is?
Yeah, I guess what comes up to my mind is resilience in leadership is the ability to generate inside the amount of energy that's sufficient, of positive energy that's sufficient to keep going when the going gets rough, in fact, right? The ability to rebound. And for that, I'll start where Adun left for the temporarily, right? With self-leadership. To be a resilient leader in the first place, you've got to be self-aware. You've got to know who you are. And if you don't, ask people around, right? And then you've got to accept who you are. You've got to accept that just like me, you are immensely flawed, and that's okay. Right? Embrace the whole package you are given, right? It's okay to not be perfect. It's very toxic to strive for perfection, especially in entrepreneurship, right? And then you've got to also make space as a leader for for growing, as Mary was saying as well, right? So for your personal growth, and also just space for appreciating yourself and appreciating what's going well in what's going on, because it's of course tempting to focus on the problems only. But I recommend you make time regularly to look at what's going really well. So appreciate yourself, which will help you in all of your complexity, and then that will help you appreciate others, and then they have a chance to become your followers. Yeah, and do take care of your wellness in the first place, right? Exercise regularly sounds very mundane and basic to say that, but believe me, my major job is executive coaching, and that is the absolute priority. Taking good care of your stamina and your sharpness. It's not just good for you, it's good for those you lead, right? And it will help them become more resilient. And once we've done all of those basic sits, then we can work to really have at most times a growth mindset, which is see the opportunities to grow, in fact, right? In failure and in success out there, on the market and inside in yourself, right? And have your people in your organization also have the same growth mindset. And a little tip for you is ask your people, right, in your social enterprise, perhaps like once a month at the coffee or tea corner, right? Hey, I'm curious, what have you learned this month with us in this social enterprise? Then first time you do that, they will look at you like with blank eyes, right? Like, oh, what are you? I've learned nothing, but don't worry, boss. I'm okay. I'm okay. And then make the question easier, right? Tell them, hey, think about the successes you've had this month. What have you learned from your successes? And then what have you learned from your failures? And what have you learned from the people you've met for the first time, right? And so give a sense that people are growing in your social enterprise, yeah, because this is highly energizing. It's one of the most powerful motivation drivers, yeah. And finally, to nurture resilience in your people, it's just as to nurture resilience in yourself, develop a sense of self-worth. And I often say to managers, if you can only do one thing in your day with your people, build their self-esteem, because that together with growth is a very powerful driver of resilience. Shamo, that's in short what came to my mind.
No, thank you for that. So from what you have just said, you know, how you must nurture resilience, I would like to know what trends or skills are needed then in resilience leadership, because I know you've touched on self-leadership, you know, being aware, making room to grow, but what other trends and skills are needed in resilient leadership, and how can social entrepreneurs apply these skills or trends to their operations and daily lives?
Yeah, thanks. Well, what's putting us all leaders in a tough place these days is the constant change and more complex challenges, one after the other, right? And there's one thing we need to be clear about. We are individually not smart enough to figure out alone the best way forward. Nobody can, even Bill Gates, right? So we've got to develop collective intelligence. Our new job description, if you will, as a leader is really encompassing big time be a trigger of collective intelligence. And that's where what I was mentioning briefly in my introduction about helping others bring out their best, helping the team brings out its best, right? And then be agile in our thinking. Try to think with speed, right? Is really important. Another important thing is what's part of Microsoft motto nowadays. It's done is better than perfect. The search or the quest for perfection is most toxic. Forget about it. Just deliver good enough and as soon as you can, right? Embrace fail forward so all of this is facilitating resilience in our really difficult environment, right? Because it decreases the level of guilt or shame, perhaps, at not coming with some great things alone, right? And instead, it leverages the power of the team, and it leverages the agility, right? That's really, really important. One more thing, yeah. These days, I've been inviting the leaders I work with to develop, believe it or not, their inner artist, in fact, right? It's like, when you think of it, artists have acquired this way of being that's really free, right? Free from a lot of preconceived ideas they inherited from education or society or their parents or whatever, and they are in touch with their creativity, wild creativity, I would say. And this is really important in entrepreneurship nowadays, right? To tap into our creativity reservoir. And so my invitation to social entrepreneurs and all entrepreneurs for that matter is really to expand the size of your world. So go out there, meet weird people from different walks of life and get to appreciate what's amazing about it, about them. Because doing that, you expand the size of your world and therefore the number of possibilities that can be generated in your mind when you face the next problem. I hope I'm making some sense here, Chiamo. Am I?
Yes, no, yes, you are. Because I even see Lucy has put in the chat what you were just saying. So she's been capturing all this knowledge for us to read about. So now I'll just move on to Mary, who I'd like for her, with her experience at with transformational leadership, to just give us to define for us what transformational leadership is. Mary, please take the floor.
Thank you, Chamo. Transformational leadership basically implies that it's a person who actually knows what change needs to be implemented and can be able to facilitate this particular change. This person has a vision, is visionary basically. They can be able to imagine and paint a future and be very practical about it. They have clear goals of where they want, the clear goals to achieve their vision. They set out clear expectations of their teams, and they have a clear path. They can define this particular clear path. And a transformational leader is also open to learning. Is a person who is willing to learn from others. Is not fixated on their own path and what they want to see, but they are willing to learn along the way. They are very motivating. They work with their teams to actually motivate them to become their best. They nurture their team members, even as leaders. So they are supportive, they recognize potential, they recognize talent, and they make sure that they use this particular talent. They go beyond the self. You're not just about you, it's about others. It's about the change, the desired change you want to see happen. And they have this strong belief in themselves that they can. They build good relationships around them. And that's what we nurture, mainly with the youth that we work with, even with the faculty members that we work with, that you have to have a strong belief in yourself. You have to be able to build relationships around yourself. You have to build teams, and you have to be able to design your delivery path. How can you deliver on what you promise? How can you deliver this vision? But can you also allow others to work with you and give them that room to grow? So they are building collaborations. They are building collaborations beyond their own organization, beyond their own areas of performance. So they are looking beyond that. Who can I work with to achieve my vision? So they also are able to identify the talent that they can work with to achieve their vision. a transformation, or like what we have done basically with the faculty members, is to be able to dream for themselves, but also to have a dream for their own graduates. What would they want them to see their graduates doing in future? You're within an organization that has its own vision. So normally we don't always run our own organization. So we can be leaders within the organizations where we are. So do we have this kind of entrepreneurial mindset that allow us room to see the gaps and to be able to fill these particular gaps? So can you have a small dream for your students, even as you go to class, that this is what I want to see my student doing? Then as a leader, as a faculty, how do I design learning that enables this kind of thought process in my students? Where do I get the appropriate content that informs my student on becoming the person they want to be? Remember, as a student, when you go to school, you have a vision for yourself. You have your small dream. So how does your small dream align with what we are offering? Why did you come to my institution? It's because my institution offered you an opportunity to become the person you want to be. As a faculty member, how do I enable you to do this? How can I help you design your path? Then that way I'll be bringing about the appropriate transformation in you to become the person that you want to be. So normally we term this as transformative learning. Yeah. So how can I design transformative learning that enables my students to become? And how can I build teams around me so that we work as a team? Mainly we work in silos, even within institutions. I think Adun can agree to this. Maybe I'm in the School of Business, but I'm only teaching business courses. And I'm in the School of Education, so I'm teaching pedagogy. But we need to work together because we need to understand the world of work and where our students are living. So that as an educationist, I can design learning spaces that are reflective of where the students are going to be. This way I become that transformative facilitator of learning, and I can be able to develop transformational leaders or transformative leaders, whichever term we choose to use. So basically, what would be the critical things that we want to, the critical skills that we need to build in this particular person? I think they've already been mentioned, and one critical thing is self-leadership. I think everyone has talked about it. JF has talked about it. Adun has talked about it. Having the self-discipline, learning who you are, and inculcating or building in yourself that discipline that you can be able to focus onto what you want to see happen. And you can be able to even have small dreams. It's not always a big dream that is very futuristic. It can be short dreams. But from a learning institution, it's good to have a dream for the kind of graduates you want to see and to identify how does my course or what I am teaching prepare this person for the bigger vision. What can I do in my course if my course was the only course that was designed and this person just did this particular course? What kind of a leader would they become? What kind of impact would they have? Would they become the transformational leader that we dream of? It's not just about the content, it's also designing activities that make this person think through themselves. How can they become reflective of themselves, their actions every day, and see what it is that they're contributing in their societies? So maybe we can still talk more about that. JF mentioned about collective learning. How can we have collective intelligence? And that alone, our intelligence is not enough. But together, we bring in richness. So how do I bring people together to work together? How can I make sure that my student actually understands their community? Yeah. Because as a leader, I have to be able to identify that. As a teacher, I need to be able to identify that. What is it that will build this particular student? Not just being in class, learning content and reproducing. It's being able to get this information to think and connect and bring about the desired changes. So probably I allow room for more discussion. I have a lot to say about a transformational leadership. I think most of us need to do that, but really collaboration and working with others is a critical skill for a transformational leader, for you to be able to deliver your vision. For you to be able to develop appropriate processes and strategies, you need to build teams. And these teams have to be very diverse, you know. It's not just from one area of thought. You have to be able to bring that, even in the classroom. It has to be done that. You have to be able to help your student also to be able to identify how they can build these teams, even in their learning process.
Thank you very much, Mary, for that elaborative explanation on what a transformative leadership should be like. So next on, I'd like to invite Dr. Adun to tell us more about what exactly strategic and responsible business leadership is about and how social entrepreneurs can identify opportunities by being strategic leaders.
Thank you, Zahra. That's a good question. And look, right, it's nice that we're saying all these beautiful things. The reality is that sometimes being a social entrepreneur means that you don't have the luxury of time to think about the structure, to think about the processes, and to think about all that you need to do. But like Mary said, your success is so dependent on it, because actually we're doing another thing next week on structure to scale. And it's important that we understand that as a social entrepreneur, there's so much that's being asked of your time. There's so much that's being asked of your day-to-day activity. How do you now carve out that time to take some steps back? Now, some people wake up at 4 a.m., some people wake up at 5 a.m., you know, in a way to have some sort of me time to reflect, to think, and to start planning the structure. Other people do it in other ways where you just try to also have other partners, other co-founders that work with you in a way that you're sharing hopefully the same ideas and the same vision, and you want to then achieve it. So my point is just to say that I understand that it's challenging, it's difficult, and sometimes what we say in theory might not directly apply as easily in practice. But that doesn't mean that it's not important, because sometimes it's good for us to know where we want to get to, and we know how we want to build to that. And then how does that link to what being a responsible leader is about, or even being a strategic leader? I think there are two things, right? So responsible leadership, how I define it, is that your organization needs to have, first of all, its basic vision and mission in terms of what it wants to achieve. And then that comes from who you are as a leader, as your personal self, in terms of your own values, your own convictions, etc. But responsibility then goes beyond that to say, what should I be doing? What ought I to be doing in my society, especially if you're a social entrepreneur, right? You're trying to address social issues by finding business opportunities. So it's that sense of what should I be doing that I need to do, that I'm not doing. But it's also what should I not be doing that I am doing. And it's also responsibility for what am I not doing that I need to do. So there are three things. First of all, doing your vision, achieving your vision, your mission. Secondly, is taking responsibility for your actions, but also taking responsibility for your inaction, right? So if you know that you ought to do something and you are not doing it, right? That is at the core of what responsible leadership is about. So it's about who you are as a person, your values, your ethics, what guides your decision, because leadership is nebulous, right? You can be, leadership doesn't just ask you to be effective in achieving your goals. It's then us, we humans or we organizations, that then add either the moral dimension of leadership to it, i.e. what is right and what is wrong, or we're the ones that then start to add the ethical to it in terms of, are we being, are we leading organizations with integrity? Are we working in a place of honesty? Are we working in a place of transparency? And that leads to the next question, which is, what is strategic leadership, right? Because strategic leadership is basically just ensuring that whatever decisions that you're making, you're informed by some sort of guidelines or some sort of strategy. So I like to call it like evidence-based decision-making that is made from having evidence, and that you then have a plan, a strategy. You know, if you don't plan, then you're planning to fail. And so it's saying that, what do I want to achieve? What are my milestones? What are my timelines? And what we see here in Nigeria anyway, is that sometimes as a social entrepreneur, you want to do so many things because there's so many issues going on. And sometimes you don't have the team that will help you achieve it. But it's important to have that clarity of focus and say, what do I really need to do? When do I need to do it? So that's why you have a business strategy or an organizational strategy. But then a strategy that doesn't have an implementation plan is basically just a beautiful document, right? So it's very important as well on our side of the world that we also ensure that we have implementation. So it's more like a strategic implementation plan. And the leader basically just then says, how am I going to lead strategically? How am I going to lead thoughtfully? How am I going to lead creatively? Again, going back to all the different things I said about practical intelligence, it's knowing which of the hats I need to put on to ensure that I'm achieving my set goals. So your goals must be set, and you should try as much as possible not to deviate from it. That doesn't mean that you're not adaptive, right? So going from what Jean has also said about reflexive leadership, COVID-19, many of us could not have predicted this. This time last year, what we were planning for 2020 is completely different from where we are now. But it's that sense of, at least you have, it's almost, I also liken it to, you want to drive to a destination. You should know where you want to go to and some idea of your route. Now, if you then see traffic along the way, you can veer off to come back to the path, right? But it's having that clarity of what your path is and being very convinced about it. So you must almost believe it, right? Because if you're a leader and you do not believe your own vision and your own mission, it's very difficult to also translate that to others. So going back to what Mary has said about transformational leadership, you have to have the charisma, you have to get people to join you so that it's not just about the transactional form of leadership where they are working for reward or they're being penalized for non-work. Like we have in some organizations where when your staff comes late, you fine them money. And I always tell my class that once you do that, if they get another opportunity that gives them more money than what you're fining them, they will always be late. How do you teach them not to be late without having it as a transactional form of leadership? But anyway, I'll let Mary talk more about the transformational leadership and also how followership is very important for any leader to be successful. So those are the key points that I would like to talk about: responsible leadership and strategic leadership. Particularly on the continent here, I would like to say that you cannot be a social entrepreneur without trying your best to be a responsible leader. You cannot actually even be a leader without being a strategic leader, right? You need to have strategy. But the key thing is about responsibility, and it ties very closely to sustainability, right? Looking at the long term of things, looking at the environmental, the social, but also the economic side of things. And then, I don't know if we have time for this, but if I do have time, I'll come back and talk about how we can then, incorporate some sort of circular economy principles as well within our organizations, within the structure of our organization. So we are also learning as a learning organization, and that learning keeps feeding back into what we do. It's like a loop. And so that way we also ensure that other people that come after after this organization has started, other people that join know how to key into the goals and values of the organization without feeling like they are not part of your journey. So if Zara gives me more time, I'll come back to that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adun. That is quite insightful. And you've mentioned something to do with sustainability, being sustainable leaders to ensure the longevity of our organizations. So I want to throw these questions to Mr. Jean-Francois. So you did mention the issue of maintaining this open-mindedness, especially for social entrepreneurs that will enable them to face unprecedented situations, right? So looking at how the pandemic has had this very negative effect on businesses, on the economy, how do you, or rather, how would you advise social entrepreneurs to maintain that resilience during unprecedented times?
Yeah, so thanks very much, Zara. I'd say a couple of things, right? First, just like Anna Frank, in the Second World War, right? In very difficult conditions, she was saying, yeah, there is all this misery, but there is also all this beauty, right? And why she kept hope is because she decided to also look at the beauty, not only the misery, right? And think of Nelson Mandela in the first place, right? With such formidable hope that his fight for justice and fairness would eventually get him out of that terrible prison, right? And get to do great things for the world. And then he did, right? So it's like, have this discipline to not fall into depression in a way, right? Just looking at all that's going bad, right? And look also at what's going good, going well. It's a smart choice because it makes your mind more sharper, actually. And then in line with what Mary and Adun were saying, really, look at what you see around in the environment that you can convert into opportunities. You know, there is this, the word in China for challenge or risk is the combination of two ideograms, danger, opportunity, right? So keep that in mind, right? Yeah, see the danger and then think what's the opportunity behind, which is really part of the one-on-one of entrepreneurship, right? And it's just one of the things we need to remind ourselves when we are stressed, and then take the best care of yourself. And I would say even love yourself enough, right? Because if you're not going to love yourself enough, you're not going to love others enough, and then you will not be a leader. After all, the definition of a leader is so simple, right? It's a person who has followers, right? And who are people going to follow, right? When you think of it, and particularly in time of crisis, they're going to follow first and foremost someone who cares for them. Yeah, they're not going to follow the smartest guy in the room, because the smartest guy in the room will not be smart enough anyway in a complex crisis, right? They will really follow someone who cares for them. And for a social enterprise, of course, it's so important that the stakeholders can see you are the guys that really care, right? And then in difficult contexts, perhaps your appeal as one of the guys who really care will be enhanced. And then I'd love to just remind you of what Adun was saying about being very practical. And Mary mentioned that as well, right? So it's not a time to build complex strategies or sophisticated things, right? We've got to take one wave after the other and be hands-on, right? And just like Adun was saying, not write that beautiful strategic document, but rather get a wise path for the future that you really believe in, as Adun said again, right? And then get very clear about what the first mile we take on that path, right? And what does it take from me? What does it take from others? And then get going.
Thank you for that, Jean. And I'd like to invite Mary. Mary, same question as Jean's, but a bit twisted. How do you think such unprecedented times calls for transformation, especially in our leaders looking at social entrepreneurs in the various sectors? How do you think they can learn from such unprecedented conditions?
I think this season has taught us one thing. And, we've been confined in our spaces, like with family. I don't know when was the last time that we actually stayed at home for 6 months as a family. And this makes you realize that you actually don't even know them and you don't connect with them. It has given us a time to reflect and look at ourselves inside ourselves and get to know what our greatest strength and what our greatest weaknesses are. So this brings me to the point that has come up often in this conversation, being reflective. As a transformational leader, you need to be a very reflective person. You have to evaluate the experiences around you. You have to be socially aware and reflect on the experiences around you to be able to see where you can be able to impact change or provide change. What I have discovered, in this season at a personal level, is that we are scared of ourselves, even facing ourselves. We are confident when we are with other people and doing just things as if they are. But we are scared of facing who we are. And we say that for you to become any kind of a leader, you have first to have that self-leadership in you, to have the self-discipline, to know who you are, and to be able to address that inner person. For you to be able to prepare yourself for a changing world, for an uncertain future, because we don't know about tomorrow. And that's what COVID-19 probably has taught us, that anything can happen anytime. But how are we prepared to be able to bounce back, to have that resilience, to know that we can go down, but then we can rise up again. So one of the things that we really need to learn is to be able to face ourselves, to have that self-leadership in ourselves, to have that self-discipline, and to be able to face who we are. Then to be able to connect with our community, how well do we actually notice things around us, situations around us, and how do we respond to those situations? If I know how to respond, I can form a vision. Remember we said we always start with a dream of the change that you want to see happen. How can I make sure that my dream is achieved given the situations around me? But am I aware of the situations around me? Am I aware of the people around me? And how can I be able to best identify also who to work with that can be able to support this? If I want to see families being resilient and being able to fend for themselves, like what we have seen with this season, if you don't have a job, then you're definitely not going to be anywhere. And most people lost their jobs. Most people don't even have the means of a livelihood. So how can I, as a teacher right now, what is it that I can do with my students to make sure that they can enable their communities and they can work with their communities? How can I build this particular student to be thinking? You know, they have all the knowledge, but the one thing they normally say is that I can't get employment. But do we need to always have employment? Can we be able to be creating this? Can we bring up a generation that actually sees problems around us as solutions? Yeah, how can we design that particular space? Then we can be able to bring up transformational leaders. Okay, when you talk about transformational leader, is a person who actually is able, not just, you know, we've been talking about charismatic leaders, big influencers. When you think about transformational leaders, that's what we are really thinking about, right? But I think from the context where from where I stand, I see a transformational leader has these characteristics. They are able to influence others. They have to have that ability. But they also have to be people who are aware of what changes are required by the community. They have to be very, very aware of where they are and the kind of people they are having, the kind of audience they have, direct audience that they have, and how they can use this audience to bring about the desired change. You have to have very good sales skills. I think the top of the skills for a transformational leader is sales. You have a vision, you're able to vision and to have a very clear vision and a path to that vision. Then you have to be able to sell this vision. So you have to have a very good communication strategy. If you don't have one, you have to identify somebody that can work, a team that can actually work with you and share the vision, and they can be able to take this vision to the next level. Yeah. So the part of a transformational leader that we all agree on is the motivation bit, because the charisma, you know, you have to have the charisma, you have to have the language, and also I think the body posture comes into place and all that. But the most important thing is being able to also connect with people. That social awareness. And that, I think there's a fourth quotient that people have been talking about, the adversity quotient that has been tested in this season. When things change and they're no longer normal, how do you respond to that? Do you react or do you respond? Are you that person who is able to stand back and think through the actions you can take? Not looking at the situation like, now things have come to an end, but this is the beginning of something different. Yeah, it's like a stop for you to think. We've been talking also a lot about adaptive leadership, where you're able to move, like going to the balcony in a party. You know, you're in a party, then you go to the balcony and watch the party down there. But you're part of that party. You're part of that particular team working there. Are you able to observe yourself from there and see how well you're working with others? Are you able to objectively look at your own actions based on how people are working with you, and then see where your gaps are? Being able to judge yourself objectively and being able to be flexible enough to learn with the people to bring about the change that you want. And I think that has been our challenge as leaders in this particular season. How well did we bounce to the given circumstances? Have we been able to lead our teams to maybe we still have the vision we had. Like say we have the vision of developing this faculty that brings about transformative learning and assisting students to become the people they want to be. So now we can't meet our students face to face. Are we able to move to another space and take our students with us? And how can we still achieve that particular vision of social transformation, even if you're not able to meet physically? Or did we go back into our case and start thinking, now the world has come to an end, I can't go to class, I can't teach, yeah? My institution has not created the space, but how can I become part of this institution to enable my institution to become a transformative institution as well? So I think basically from my point of standing is, how do we build, what skills do we need to build? What is it that we have identified as the big drawback in this season, and how do we take advantage of that for us to go into to go into the new future, even as we design learning experiences for our students, as we lead, as we train change makers? How to enable them to really become these thought leaders as well? Adun has talked about strategic leadership, and I think you can't really separate the two. So I think we really marry into the two. You're a transformational leader, but you have to also be a strategist. You have to be able to strategize on how this change happens, not just having the charisma and having the influence, but it's also being able to design the future that you want to see to bring about the desired change. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mary, on sharing very thoughtful insights on reflective leadership and how building skills in our teams can very much impact how organizations work, and also how our communities view organizations and how we impact communities. So before I invite Dr. Adun, I would like to invite our audience members to please ask any questions that you have in the comment section, in the chat section, or in the Q&A section. And we will have towards the end an open plenary where our panelists will discuss each of the questions that you've raised. So Dr. Adun, you did mention the issue of having this responsible kind of leadership, and you're building on how we can have this evidence-based decision making. And there's something you're to touch about in the end. So kindly, the platform is yours.
Fantastic, thank you. So again, to the attendees, thank you so much for attending. If you do have questions, like Zahara said, please put them in. Again, the key thing here is that, what are we trying to achieve, right? We're trying to achieve change in our society. Now, we also need to understand that, particularly in Africa, there's so many gaps in terms of how we do things. So when Mary spoke about a learning organization, and I think John also referred to that, how do we learn as an organization? So, and how do we learn from other people? The only key difference between our species and other species is that we're able to learn from each other, and we're able to advance knowledge. Now, we've done some work in circular economy, particularly looking at how to secularize SMEs, but also social entrepreneurship organizations, and also how to start using the circular economy principles to solve problems. So problems in waste management, for example, problem in architecture, there's a lot of waste in building. And it's this sense of awareness, going back to practical intelligence, is this sense of awareness of what is happening around you, right? Where is waste? And waste doesn't always have to be material. So again, in an organization, where is waste in terms of knowledge? Where is waste in terms of experience? How are you ensuring that those that work with you are able to learn from your organization and able to contribute, like I mentioned earlier, in a way that closes the loop? So for those of us that don't know about circular economy, it's basically looking at how we move from a linear economy of build, use, and dispose to something more circular that incorporates how do you ensure that from the beginning, you're designing for reuse, you're designing for recycling, and you're redesigning to be able to feed back into the system. And so within a social entrepreneurship organization, it's saying that, how are we documenting our processes? How are we encouraging people that work with us to share what they're finding, to share their own thoughts, their own thinking, their own, like John said, reflections, right? Because as a leader, part of what you're able to do as well is to gather a lot of all these different intelligences and insights and use that to improve on your organization. But you must plan for it. It doesn't happen just by happenstance. It's not going to happen by mistake. And so the practical things here are saying that, how do you ensure that if someone has worked with you for X amount of years, anybody else that comes in already learns and knows a lot of the things that they have learned so that they're not having to do it again? But then if we then even expand that, it's also saying that how as an ecosystem, right, or how as an industry, depending on where your social entrepreneurship lies in, how are you also working with others within the same industry or within the same ecosystem to ensure that you're learning from each other? How do you create or aggregate, this collaborative form of working together? So it's not just about competition, but saying that within the value chain, how are we feeding into what the other person is doing? And part of that is sharing. I think we don't share enough on the continent. We don't document enough. We don't share enough. And that means that we're constantly repeating our mistakes. So for example, how are we learning from Kenya in Nigeria? How is Kenya learning from Nigeria? So I like that this conference is taking place, but how do we move on from just talking about it to actual in practice saying, how are these things being done in East Africa? Is there something we can learn from other parts of the world that we can bring in here as well? But particularly because here we operate within similar contexts, how do we ensure that within the value chain, we're able to improve and enhance the quality of what we ought to be doing? Because if you go back to what I said about responsible leadership, sometimes it's not only just meeting the needs now, it's thinking long term and saying, how do I ensure that I'm planning my organization or building my organization to meet the future needs that can come up? I remember I spoken about sustainable leadership. How do you also ensure that whatever actions you're taking now, you're thinking about the side effects, the impacts, and you're trying to mitigate the negative impacts and enhance the positive impact? So when we start to really think about it like that in practical terms, we see that yes, there's the day-to-day, but the need for strategy, right, is so important. I try to encourage my students, my owner managers, to take an hour, at least an hour a week, if you can't even take a few minutes each day. So just say, how was the day-to-day? What did I do? What couldn't I do better? Take an hour or 2 hours a week, carve that time, and then constantly be revising and saying, this is my strategic goal. Am I meeting it? Am I not? But to do that, you have to have, like I said, the big plan distilled into small implementable chunks, and then you review them either every week or every month, depending on what your plans are. But that's how you also know that you have the pulse of your organization. And if you plan for this inclusiveness that Mary and Jean have referred to, this collective intelligence, this ability to work as a team, if you plan for that and then you start to institute that within the structure of your organization, then you can really now start to be a truly learning organization that is able to meet your objectives, but also be able to, as a leader, be fulfilled in what it is that you're trying to do. So I think I've said quite a lot of different things, but I hope that you have been able to follow through with this.
Very well. Thank you so much, Dr. Adun. And I'd like to invite Mary or Jean, whoever of you has something to add on what Dr. Adun has just shared with us.
Mary, beauty first, perhaps Mary first, right? No, I have to go. Okay, so first, I so resonate not just with what Adun is sharing, but with your energy, Adun, and your energy, Mary. And each time I have the blessing to go to Africa, I just come back a better person, all energized by the awesome energy on the continent. In fact, okay, so that's not what the questions are Zara asked, so I'll stick to the question now. I was carried away. Mary was talking about beginnings and pains, and it reminded me of a quote from a Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu long time ago, right? The gentleman said, new beginnings can be disguised as painful endings, right? So let's keep that in mind and see the new beginning, despite besides the pain. The other thing that came to my mind is we've not spoken so much about, well, we've spoken about emotional intelligence, but I was thinking perhaps it could be good that I share a simple exercise for social entrepreneurs, right? It's like when you feel really bad, you feel at the end of the world, you losing hope, losing energy, you really, really feel so kind of terrible, right? Or perhaps angry or frustrated or I don't know, so bad, right? So then there is this technique in emotional intelligence, which is pretty simple. And it's like, remove yourself from the situation. And then I'll ask yourself, what is it that matters to me that makes me so unhappy or so angry or so frustrated here? What is it that matters to me so much that it just explains for my bad state, right? Emotional state, right? And then when you found out, then dig deeper and ask yourself again, at a deeper level, what is this all about? And then you find something, right? And at a deeper level, again, ask yourself, right? And so you just go through the exercise until you reach something really deep that is triggered in you and that makes you so full of negative energy, right? And that cools you down. And once you've done that, so you're a bit more cool-minded because you really vented a lot all by yourself, right? Then ask yourself, what assumptions have I made since the start about what matters most to me and what it's all about at a deeper level? So revise your assumption as your mind is calmer. You will find that some of the assumptions you are making are probably not accurate or just partial, right? So then you can repaint the situation more accurately from your more rational mind. And then with all that done, you can take action, right? So that's one of many things we can do in coaching, of course. I hope I was clear enough. It's very, very helpful for you to regain that self-leadership that we all said is so very important, right? Because of course you need to lead yourself before you're gonna lead anybody else. Yeah, Zara, I hope that was in line with what you expected me to offer.
Yes, thank you very much, Jean. Mary, any thoughts on the same?
Actually, my thought is on what Adun said earlier, just to emphasize, like what we are learning from each other. As in the social enterprise space, I believe it's learning from each other. And she mentioned something about, learning what you're doing, your processes, and being able to document all that so that you learn from yourself and you can be able to inform others. What is it that you're learning from Nigeria? How have they coped? Is there anything being documented and can be shared with other countries? What is it that we are learning in Kenya? What is it that I'm learning? And how can I be able to share this out so that, remember we started by talking about mentorship, right? Mentorship is reflecting on your own journey, the lessons you have learned, and being able to share with somebody else. And in the social enterprise space, I believe this is a critical element in how we transform our societies and our communities towards development, to becoming a better society. Are we documenting? Are we learning from each other? Have we got to know that we have to break the silos that exist around ourselves? Become a very individualistic society. And I think the new era has taught us that you can't actually become an individual and be successful. And I'll give an example of some community I visited. So there's this one guy that has made a lot of money in his community. So he's built this big house, and then he's built up this particular fence. So it's like what do you call it? And he has a very big fence to protect himself from the poor community, right? So he has to employ security guards. And he says his way of contributing to the society is by providing employment to the security guards. But could he approach this security issue differently? What if he was able to empower his community so that they are self-employed, so you have less poor people, right? And then the people become your security. What is it that we do? He's an individual, he just wants to acquire the wealth and keep it to himself. But that makes him safe. He doesn't even enjoy the wealth that he has. Another person lives without a fence, and he is not scared in the night because everyone else is at the same status as they are. Because they have shared what they have with them, they have lifted them up. There's a quote that was going around, like this farmer would always make sure that the farmers around him have the seed he has. Why? Because there's cross-pollination, and he doesn't want poor quality pollen coming into his compound. So he wants to have high quality yield. So if he wants to have high quality yield, then he has to make sure that everyone else has the same kind of seed that he has. And I believe that's what you're talking about, sharing and working as communities and knowing how we can be able to build each other. To have a better society, then we can go towards the kind of development that we want, so that I'm not enclosed in myself. What is it that I learned from Zahra? What is it that I learned from Adun? What can we be able to do collectively together? And who provides this particular kind of leadership that brings people together, to think together, to provide a solution to a common community? Wherever we are is the learning space. Where we live is our learning space. So it's not being at the University of Nairobi and teaching within the University of Nairobi. It's also knowing that Nairobi is the learning space for University of Nairobi and the students live there. How can I make sure that my students bring about the desired change within that particular space? I hope I have contributed.
Thank you, Mary. You very much have resonated with what Jean and Adun have shared with us on being very reflective, and you know how your actions tend to impact your teams, and again how your teams tend to impact those around them, that is the environment, communities, and all other stakeholders around. So I think we don't have any questions from our audience, so I would just invite you to share any last thoughts, because I think we're almost done with this session, because it ends at 2:45 East Africa time. So any last thoughts that each one of you has, and I will start this with Mr. Jean-Francois.
I was thinking of the entrepreneurs I'm coaching, at the young entrepreneurs I am coaching, right? So very talented young people, way smarter than me, to the point that I don't understand that much of what they tell me, right? Because they speak super fast with lots of acronyms, and they still see enormous value in coaching, and they come back and come back and come back. And it took me time to figure out, because really I thought, oh, what value can they find from talking with me, right? And actually, the value is one. I tell them, wow, sorry, you go so fast, and I don't understand what you're telling me. Can you make it simple for me, please? Yeah, and that is enormously powerful, right? Asking people to simplify their thinking until it's understandable by Mr. Nobody like me, right? And so I would love to perhaps leave that tip with our entrepreneurs on the program today, right? Simplify your thinking. If you can't explain it to your kids, probably it's not clear enough in your mind. Someone, I think perhaps Mary quoted Einstein before, right? And Einstein said also, if you can't explain something simply, it's because it's not clear in your mind enough yet. So that's the first thing, right? Simplify your thinking. The second thing I've observed from these bright talents I'm coaching is often they've neglected development of connection with others because their brain has been occupied since childhood at devising nerdy stuff, right? And so if you feel that at times you struggle with human connections as an entrepreneur, then just do more of it and you'll find your way, right? But this is really, really important, and as much obviously in social entrepreneurship as in other forms of entrepreneurship. So that's the second point, human connections, right? And number three is I've observed these superb talents often lack common sense. They lack common sense. And so I tell them, all right, I'm going to put my peasant hat with good common sense. And the country I come from, originally France, when we talk about peasant or farmer common sense, it's a very flattering thing, right? Because we admire farmers for having real savvy, practical, no-nonsense common sense, right? And then I ask them, yeah, your new value proposition to your community or your client, right? I really don't see how it's of any value. So please explain to me, right? Until they really get common sense. Or they've got this brilliant strategy and I ask them, okay, so what's going to be your first step and your next step and your next step? And it's not clear at all, right? So force yourself, make sure you have common sense, right? Practical common sense, right? Yeah, so those are the three areas for further development that I've seen entrepreneurs who I have the privilege to coach need, right? It's like simplify their thinking, nurture human connectivity, if you will, right? Develop a sense of connecting with others, right? And number three, common sense, right? Yeah, that's what came to my mind, Sarah and Chamo.
Maybe in a minute, maybe for my conclusion, I can respond to one of the questions here, which is talking about what tools have we been able to use to implement what it is that we're talking about. For us, we've been working with Ashoka closely in making students develop their own change maker journey. Not just students, even our faculty. So the change maker journey simply is a portfolio where you start by stating what your vision is and the challenge you'd like to address. Then when you come into class, you will be looking at how you use the different courses to actually achieve the change that you want to see happen. But the first thing is that you have to be able to have a clear vision, your own dream of your own future, and then identify a challenge that you'd like to be able to address in your community. Then see how well it fits in with the course that you're taking. How can this course assist you towards addressing that particular challenge? So it's actually a very nice tool that probably anyone can be able to reach out also through Ashoka to see this change maker journey, how you define it. So that's one of the tools that we are using in the academic, because you're dealing with young people who are starting off their life. They know what their dream is and where they want to go, but how can they define this particular, how they have defined their future, what they want to be, but how does this path look like and what can they be able to do? Implementing a collaborative intelligence, as they are asking, it's also what we are designing in class, so that you're not just learning alone, but you have to go to the community, identify that particular problem, come to class, and be able to design a solution, but engage the community in validating your solution and contributing towards this particular solution. So it becomes a project, something that you want to work. If you're doing agriculture, can you work with the farmers as a student and even as faculty? If you're working like in the Jua Kali sector, the informal sector in Kenya is your living space, then what can you do as a business student to work with this informal sector, people to improve their business? They become part and parcel of what you are designing in your classroom and becomes part of your change maker journey, the portfolio. I think we only have 1 minute now.
Yes, we do. So Adun, could you just give us 1 minute of your parting shot, please?
Right. Just very quickly, in terms of tools that work, I think any tools that helps you to set a structure, that also helps you to understand, manage your team. So I recommend Asana. Asana is a good tool in terms of practical tool that if you're trying to do things and ensure your team is able to connect. If you have some sort of CRM for customers as well, you can either use Salesforce, but there are other more affordable CRM options. Although Salesforce is free if you're social entrepreneur and NGO. So that's something you can also look at. So that it helps you to also be able to manage your customers, your clients, relationship management, because that's part of the structure that we're talking about, right? So that you're also able to ensure that you're sustainable. Now, in terms of the first question, that I think it's beautiful that Ashoka is already doing this. I think there's more that we can do in terms of cross-pollination of findings so that we start to really connect with an East and Western Africa perspective of how our chain makers navigating these journeys, how are the social entrepreneurs dealing with what problems, and how can we learn from, like Mary said, how can we learn from each other? So I think that's a very good question that I think it was Kathleen that asked that question, that's something we perhaps need to continue this conversation. So it's nice that we've spoken about it here, but how do we also then, action it practically so that perhaps by next year, we're bringing some findings and insights that we've, worked on together. I think that can be powerful. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much for having me on this session.
Thank you for that. I'd just like to say to Kathleen, we will be addressing your answer tomorrow during the Brain Trust that we'll also be having tomorrow. So we'll have the panelists answer this, and I just want to say thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to all the attendees. It's been a great knowledge and learning sharing session, and we really value your input, and will apply our knowledge and will apply all these learnings from you guys into our daily lives. And we'll also reach out to you guys. We'll check out your LinkedIn. We'll follow you guys on the social media. So if you are okay with with the attendees following you, can you please just put your websites in the chat just so everybody can follow each other? So yeah, for me, I just wanted to say thank you. I don't know, Zara, if you have any last words before we close off.
I am going to amplify on what Chiama said. Thank you so much for joining on this discussion today, our panelists, our attendees. And I see Jean has already shared his LinkedIn link. So for the panelists, for Mary and Adun, if you're comfortable with that, thank you for also sharing that with our attendees. Adun, I know you'll be joining us tomorrow as well. So we look forward to having you. As for Mary and Jean, it was a pleasure to listen into your insights on leadership, and we look forward to connecting with you on other platforms as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.